How you been? There's quite a bit to speak to you about this time around. I've followed, and yeah, I disavowed Trump the other day too. After I saw his tweet, actually, I want to bring that up. He basically said Kamala's America. This is Kamala's America, and it's just a bunch of like Pakistanis and Afghanistani people burning the American flag, and they're wearing this hat, and it's like it's just so stupid because Muslims make up what 1% of America's population, 5% of the immigrants. This is not what if you're going to say that illegal immigration is terrible, you show a bunch of Mexicans.
Right. Well, yeah, that's obviously who it is. It's all Venezuelans and Mexicans and Indians and Chinese. And we all know why he's posting that picture. It's because that is what satisfies the Jewish donors, to hype up this Muslim threat. It has everything to do with the war in Gaza, So, yeah, I saw that. And it's just the latest in a long string of disappointments in terms of both policy and rhetoric. This is just another neocon administration. That's what it feels like to me. So
I should have seen that coming in the debate when he called Joe Biden a Palestinian. That was a pretty clear Freudian slip. But I let that go. I'm like, okay, he's just an old white guy and he doesn't like Muslims. But seeing how many times he's shown extreme allegiance to Israel after the assassination attempt is just like, really? Like they tried to kill you and now you're going to sell out to them? I don't know what you think about that. I don't know if you think it was Mossad or who tried to assassinate him. Who do you think it was?
Well, that's their specialty. I mean, Mossad, that's what they do. They kill people. They kill scientists, they kill politicians, they kill JFK. They try to kill George Bush Sr. So I think that when you're looking at an operation like that, you have to think in terms of who's capable of carrying something like that out and who would have the motivation. And that really leaves you with two intelligence agencies, which would be the American intelligence agencies or the Israeli intelligence agencies. And I would say that if it was the American intel agencies, it would be because of Ukraine, and I think that's less likely. No. If it was Israel, it's because days before the convention, a dead Trump would give them a President Nikki Haley. That would be their nominee, and then she would be the president. Or it even could have been Vance on some timeline. So I think there's a strong possibility they were behind it on some level. And then weeks later, he meets with Netanyahu, which he hadn't done in years at Mar-a-Lago, and they broed out. And then he went to the Stop Anti-Semitism Gala with Miriam Adelson, and it's just been endless shilling ever since then. So, yeah, it's pretty disappointing, but I'm not really surprised.
People calling you a Fed for not being on board with this is just really stupid because, like, he came out and said he's in support of abortion. He said positive things about weed. He seems like he really loosened up his stance on immigration. And like as a 2016 Trump voter too, I saw your clip earlier saying that you were petitioning around New Hampshire. So was I. I'm actually a registered voter in New Hampshire, and I voted in the small town. I'm not going to say it, but like way up in northern New Hampshire. And I'm still a registered Republican because of that election. I didn't vote in 2020, but in 2016 I voted for Trump, and it was about nationalism. It was about anti-globalists. He was saying he was going to lock up Hillary. It was high energy. The 4chan memes. I was on poll every single day. And I'm like, this is what it's about. This guy is not compromising. He was calling bitches fat on the stage. It had an aura to it. And so if you were part of that in 2016 and compared to what it is now, there's no way that you could still be enthusiastic. And I'm seeing all these influencers who are clear. A lot of them are obviously getting paid by the MAGA team, and they're all in support of Trump. I don't even think they could tell you why. And you're seeing the celebrities that are endorsing it now, and you have like prostitutes and like rappers with the grills, and they're like, I'm like, what is this about anymore? I can't define, and I'm actually gonna put out an open challenge to any of the influencers who are like, yeah, if you vote for Kamala, you're stupid. I do think that you're stupid, but why? Tell me why Trump's America in 24 is any better than Kamala. Is anti-communist? Like, what are the specific policies? I don't think they have any.
No, they're not voting for Trump. They're voting against Kamala, which is the inverse of what happened in 2016, because there was real enthusiasm for Trump in 16. People wanted, including myself, to go out and vote for him. And now there's just no program to get excited about. The rallies aren't fun. The rhetoric's not fun. There's no tweets. And if you really depress them, they would say something like, well, immigration's the big one. Here's the problem with that. One, Trump is in favor of mass legal immigration. So if you're against immigration, he has said repeatedly he wants to bring in a ton of people legally. He wants to staple green cards to diplomas. So he's not an anti-immigration or immigration restrictionist candidate, not like he was in 2016. And they'll point to illegal immigration, and they'll say we had 10 million illegals come in under Kamala, and Trump is promising mass deportations. But if you know anything about the Trump administration, illegal immigration went up under Trump. And we're not talking about 2017 when he got in. We're talking about through until the very end. And I remember I got off the Trump train roughly around May or June 2019. That's really when the rubber met the road. And it was because illegal immigration, the apprehensions at the southern border hit the highest level than they were at since 2001. It was about 160,000 illegal aliens apprehended at the border in 1 month, in the month of May and June 2019, which at that point had been the highest it had been since Bill Clinton was president. And I remember at that time saying, what are we doing here? Like, what's even the point? It's still high. It was high in 17, it was high in 18, it's high in 19, and it only came down. They'll say, well, it was reduced in 2020, but it only came down in 2020 because of the pandemic. The whole world shut down in January 2020. The United States shut down in March 2020. And then all immigration was ground to a halt because of the pandemic. And by the way, the point of electing Trump was build the wall. They can't tear it down. It will indefinitely stop immigration. But they didn't build a wall. They built 500 miles of fence. And so when Biden got in, he just opened the floodgates and it was higher than ever before. So with regard to illegal immigration, there's really no basis to say that it will maybe be lower than it was under Biden. That's probably true. It will not be lower than Obama. They will not build a wall. There will not be mass deportations. There's no plan for that. And what they've said, how they're going to carry that out, doesn't even make sense. They said they're going to do local law enforcement. They're not going to be separating families and taking people from their homes. It's not going to happen. So it's honestly, you have a lot of shills that are being paid, and then you have the other half are just delusional. They can't let go. And I'm sympathetic to the latter crowd because I get it. I mean, I was a big Trump fan, but we have to live in reality. It's like you said, there's no reason to vote for him.
I mean, he's probably going to win, don't you think? I mean, you were right about J.D. Vance. I think you called it out on my stream 6 months ago. I don't know what intel you had, but I had someone, I don't want to say his name, someone told me that it was going to be Ben Carson. He said, put $50,000 on this. It's going to be Ben Carson. There's a website I heard from some family, and I didn't do it because I don't gamble. And you were right. So what do you think is going to happen in November?
Yeah, well, it's funny you say that. I was going on a few of the shows. I was on your stream in like May. I said it to Alex Jones because I got a tip from someone credible. They said, hey, all the chatter around Mar-a-Lago says Vance. And I was skeptical because Vance is a freshman senator. He never held elected office. He became a senator last January. He won in 2022. So he's not even fulfilled one full term in the Senate. Very strange. And he's very right wing, or at least he presents that way. And he's from Ohio, which is really no longer a swing state. So for a lot of reasons, it was very puzzling to me, but I had it on good authority. And it was really because of Peter Thiel and his influence around Trump and everything. And so it turned out allegedly to be a very close decision because as it got closer to the pick at the RNC, I was hearing, well, it could be Rubio, it could be Burgum, and it could be Vance. And there was a three-way battle royale. They tipped it in for Vance. I think it's more likely Trump will win. But, here's something funny. So a lot of people don't know this. Here, we have to look at the polling. The polling says that it's going to come down really to Pennsylvania. The polling says that Trump is ahead in Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina. The polling says that Kamala is ahead in Michigan and Wisconsin. Pennsylvania is a dead heat. And so if that's how the map plays out, Nevada doesn't really matter. If that's how, but Trump is leading in the polls there. If that's how it shakes out, Pennsylvania is going to decide it. Now you can look at the polls, But you could also look at the betting markets. And everybody's looking at the betting odds. They're looking at Polymarket, which is this big betting site which has emerged recently. And they're also looking at Nate Silver, who's one of the big forecasters. He was the wonder kid from 2012. He started 538. It got bought out. Well, both Nate Silver and Polymarket are owned by Peter Thiel. So go figure. J.D. Vance was given money by Peter Thiel for his venture capital firm. J.D. Vance was given $15 million to run in the Senate in 2022. J.D. Vance got the Trump endorsement because of Peter Thiel in 22. J.D. Vance got the nomination for the vice presidency largely thanks to Peter Thiel and the influence of people like Tucker and others in Trump's orbit. And now, who's forecasting a Trump victory in 2024? Well, it's the Polymarket betting website, and it's Nate Silver, the forecaster, who are both properties of Peter Thiel. And Peter Thiel represents this national security. He represents the coming together of national security and big tech, Silicon, which are, they're really inextricably connected. And it's people like David Sachs and Jacob Hellberg who are very tight with Trump now in Trump's inner circle. And they used to be libertarian. They're very, they're kind of left on some things, but they want national security. They're worried about China. They want immigrants and they want oil to power the data centers. And that is who's really pulling the strings. So to answer your question, I think it's a coin toss, but I think Trump is probably the favorite. But it is interesting that the betting markets that favor Trump the most are owned by Thiel. Because if you look at Maxim Lott's betting odds, they say it's 50-50. But if you go on Polymarket and Nate Silver, they say Trump's running away with it. It's 60-40. So just a little word to the wise on people that are analyzing the race on where the numbers are coming from.
No, the most important issue, it has to be the funding to Israel. We just have to stop it. People are waking up more than ever. I think since the last time we spoke, like you got the new studio. Dan Bilzerian has he's been doing great things. Obviously, I like what Candace Owens is doing personally. You have some qualms with it. I see the stuff she said about Frankus is like, she's trying to position herself so she can keep her YouTube channel and still get on mainstream news. I can understand why you would have qualms with that. But there's been a massive, massive awakening. Even Andrew Tate and Tristan Tate, they used to say, they used to not really talk about the Jews or Israel, and now it's just like everyone has just said, we're gonna go all in. And I think there's the most amount of people waking up ever. Even Tucker Carlson, who you think is CIA, he said something about questioning if Winston Churchill was the good guy, if Hitler was really bad. More people are waking up to this question than ever. And I get your frustration because you've been repeating it for 8 years. I put myself in your shoes when I was like preparing for this interview. I'm like, okay, you've been saying the same thing for about 8 years, and now everyone is kind of jumping on the bandwagon now. After you lose money, you get put on the no-fly list, you get banned. Even me, I got banned in a large part for hosting you 2 years ago, and talking about the Jews. So to see everybody now like kind of profit off the wave, it is annoying, but I get it, because even there were some times where I'm sure you remember, I would be like, you know what, I'm not gonna talk about it anymore. I want to have a career and stuff, but once you speak about it, you have to, this is just the most important subject. But what do you think about this massive awakening happening?
Well, here's the thing about that, because I think you're right. There is an awakening going on. People are more aware and they're more able to talk about the Jews and Israel than ever before. And I'm not trying to nitpick. And I'm also not trying to make it all about myself. I'm not mad about, there's no anxiety on my part about being left behind or being shut out of the conversation. Here's my perspective on it. When Trump ran in 2016, he animated some very powerful ideas, talking about America used to be great, but it's not anymore. The American dream is dead. We used to be powerful, but now we're weak. We're humiliated. I'm going to get in. I'm going to make it great. These are very powerful ideas. And when he leaned into those things, people were terrified about what it could unleash racially, politically, in terms of, will there be a Democratic deficit if he gets in? There was something, he was tapping into something very dark and something very old and very powerful. But we saw what we got out of it, which is More of the same. What was the legacy of the Republican dominance of the government from 2016 to 2018? Corporate tax cut. Trump gets in, he's got a House, Senate, Supreme Court, the White House, it's all red. We hadn't had that in, 15, 16 years. What do we get out of it in the Congress? Literally a tax cut. That's it. No infrastructure, no border wall, no immigration deal, didn't end NAFTA, didn't bring the troops home, nothing. But they did cut the corporate tax rate, and they did give Israel literally their entire wish list. Shel Nadelson got his whole wish list. He got Jonathan Pollard, he got Shlomo Rubashkin, he got sovereignty over Jerusalem, he got IRGC on the terrorist list, he got Golan Heights, he got all of it. They killed Qasem Soleimani. They ripped up the Iran nuclear deal. The only thing they didn't get was regime change in Syria. But that's not even, that's probably something they wanted, but if they really wanted it, they would have gotten it. And so that's how I feel about a lot of this, because what you'll notice is people like you got totally canceled for talking to people like me. You got shit on, you lost contracts, you lost opportunities. And no one is saying your name talking about the sacrifice you made. People are, if you weren't making your own case, people would be perfectly willing to let you take all the heat. And people like myself too, and people like Myron. Look at the Whatever podcast. They totally ripped off Fresh and Fit. It's not even funny how they just stole the concept, and they're only on YouTube and monetized because whenever someone brings up Israel, they shut them right down. They keep it on gross sex, degeneracy, no politics, no Fuentes, no Israel. They're boosted by Daily Wire. And look, like no shade, but it is what it is. I don't have a problem with those guys, but it is what it is.
It's gentrification. It's like the perfect example of whites coming in and taking the black culture, and you get Fresh and Byron and then just, making it normie and corporate and TJ Maxx. But
with the Jews, okay, don't blame white people. That's Daily Wire did that. That's the operative. True, but true. I get what you mean. But so there's some truth to that. But so Fresh and Fit, they get demonetized. They are losing money. They're getting a hard time, and so on and so forth. And one has to ask yourself. One has to ask oneself, why does Nick Fuentes, SNEAKO, and Myron, why are we losing all the money and getting canceled, and you can't utter our names and we're in trouble? But people like Tucker and Candace and others can flirt with these ideas and seemingly not get in trouble. They get to remain on YouTube and they don't get in as much trouble. And, Candace, I think the jury's out. I don't hate her. I think she's playing games, and I'm putting a lot of pressure on her because I just want her to do the right thing. And I want her to be honest. And I don't trust her either, but I don't hate her. I don't, necessarily, I don't hate her guts or anything. I think she's intelligent. She'll have to choose. But somebody like Tucker seems to be protected. And he is a whole other story. Someone like yourself, someone like me, we're the nigs of the United States. I know you're like partially black and I know I'm white, but we're ethnics. Right. We're a couple of ethnics. Our parents aren't anybody. Okay, that's how we get treated in this country. It's just true. I'm Italian, Mexican, and Irish, and I get the ethnic treatment. It's just true. Tucker Carlson was fighting with the Contras in Nicaragua in the 80s, and his dad was appointed by Reagan to run Voice of America. Point being, you and I have, me, Myron, have a lot more in common, the three of us, than we do. Well, maybe less so Myron because he was a Fed, because he worked for DHS. but understand and his parents were Sudanese immigrants. But understand the point. We come from a working class background. We come from a middle, lower class background. Tucker's parents are literally Langley, Virginia, CIA, mobbed up feds. And all I'm trying to say is, we just have to make sure that this awakening is not sort of hijacked and steered to re-legitimize and fortify the establishment. That's all that's my fear. I don't care about me. If I cared about career, I would have sold out a long time ago. What I'm worried about is someone like Tucker comes along and is dropping, baby aspirin red pills, and it seems red pilled, maybe not really. And this guy has this pedigree and he doesn't get canceled. It makes me very suspicious. But people like you and I, we're the real deal. We're saying it from the heart. We found it organically. We're telling the truth. We get nuked from orbit and there's no protection. And I think people need to be cognizant of the fact that you know, we have the truth on our side. The truth is a powerful thing. And, you know, they're not above using subversive tactics to try to pull the rug out from under us and infiltrate it. They've done it before. And they're the masters of the skin suit, you know, like with Malcolm X and like, you know, even I'm sure with Islam, this is something that goes on, the skin suiting where they come in and they infiltrate, whether it's Westernizers or it's Jews or it's whoever. That's how they play. They don't, you know, it's the oldest trick in the book. They don't fight you head on, but they'll put their arm around you and say, hey, I'm one of you. And they're not really. And that's really where I'm concerned.
Yeah, the skin suiting is ultimately what probably got Malcolm X assassinated. You get feds that infiltrate the Nation of Islam, pretending to be on his side, and then they shoot him with a shotgun. And you see these, like all these terrorist attacks that made people hate Islam for so long. All of these were feds infiltrating, and pretty much Israelis dressed up like with an AK-47. Oh no, no, we hate the America. These are Israelis. These aren't Muslims. Would not do these silly things. And then you see Trump. Like this is what I lost all respect for Trump when I saw that posting about it very clearly. I don't know if anyone saw the image, but the image is there is an American flag and then 6 Muslims, and they're very obviously Muslim. There's not one other ethnicity. It's like, this is how bad it's going to be. It's like, this is not the problem, Trump. It's not, the problem is you being AIPAC Employee of the Month. It's all the U.S. politicians getting foreign aid from Israel. It has nothing to, Islam is not affecting American politics in any way whatsoever. This is stupid, and you're lying, and you're really subverting the truth movement by redirecting people to nonsense. So yeah, I get what you're saying. And it is frustrating, but I don't hold too many I'm not as angry about it as you are, basically. But obviously you're doing it longer. I want to ask, you said I saw your clip. You were saying that you would die for Trump in 2016. Do you regret saying that, or do you still stand by that?
No, I have no regrets about it, actually. Because I feel like, well, here's the thing about Trump. The bigger idea is this. What I have come to realize about Trump and Trumpism is that it was probably rigged from the beginning. And what I mean by that is, what I have come to learn about the right wing and how the right wing works and MAGA and things that I couldn't have known, because when I got into it, I was 18 years old. I was 18. I was idealistic. I didn't know anybody. It's like I said, a lot of the people in politics, people don't realize there's a pedigree. The people that are in politics, that are in intelligence, there's a pedigree there. And when I got involved in politics, I found that out very quickly. The people that I met in D.C., their uncle worked for Nixon. Their dad was in the Bush administration, so. It's generational. And, I don't like George Carlin, but his quote about it's a big club and you're not in it, that's true. And Americans don't realize that. Like, for example, Americans don't realize that Jews have so much power because most Americans don't work in industries and cities that have as much influence. If you work in banking in New York City, you deal with a lot of Jews. If you work in Hollywood and LA, you deal with a lot of them. If you have any kind of job on a Republican political campaign, you're dealing with them. They're coming in and out of the office on Capitol Hill, and they're on, they're everywhere. But if you are working at a steel mill, or you're a farmer, or you're working retail or in service in Oklahoma or Illinois or Minnesota, you won't encounter them because that's not where they are, and that's just something people need to know. So when I got into politics, I was one of those regular guys. My parents didn't go to college. I was a high school graduate. I liked Trump. I liked what he was saying. I signed up. I was a true believer. And as I've met people in politics and grown intellectually, as I've studied it and built on my understanding, what I've realized is that from the very start, there was an axis with Donald Trump that connects him to Russia, Israel, the United Arab Emirates, and it runs through the Chabad Lubavitchers, of which Jared Kushner is a part, and it runs through Bibi Netanyahu, and it runs through some of these donors. And I'll give you a perfect example of what I'm talking about. So back in 2016, there were a lot of big anonymous Twitter accounts that were pro-Trump. They called them the meme. It was the meme war veterans. They were on 4chan, Twitter, etc. One of them was called Ricky Vaughn. He was anonymous. He had a big account. And Time Magazine named the Ricky Vaughn, that's the name of a character in a movie, they named the Ricky Vaughn account as one of the top 100 most influential Twitter accounts in the election. Now, if you are a political neophyte, you look at an anonymous Twitter account, and maybe you have an anonymous Twitter account, and you think that anonymous Twitter account is like yours. You think that anonymous person is a regular guy from a regular place with regular parents who jumped on Twitter to be pro-Trump because he's sick of the political bull. He's sick of the Democrats, right? Wrong. Because it turns out Ricky Vaughn gets doxxed, and he's this guy named Douglas Mackey, and he works for Clearview AI. And Clearview AI is a facial recognition artificial intelligence company that received seed money from Peter Thiel, who's a CIA contractor. And Clearview AI scraped 10 billion faces from social media. All the big social media companies have filed lawsuits, and that's why they shut down data scraping, because Clearview AI was scraping all the faces, putting it in a database so they could recognize everybody. And now they're selling it to Israel. It's called Lavender. They're using it in the Gaza Strip. And now listen, I like Douglas Mackey. I know him and everything, and I don't even know how I feel about him as a guy. Maybe he's a patriot, maybe he isn't. But what I realized in that moment is, wait a second, things are not as they seem. That's the basis of the red pill. The red pill in the Matrix is that everything is fake, we're human batteries, and what we think is reality is an elaborate production or simulation designed to trick us. So don't believe your lying eyes. I thought that's what Trumpism was, but Trumpism is part of the Matrix, because all these pro-Trump Anon accounts, come to find out, they're being backed by intelligence contractors, defense contractors, Clearview AI. They're backed by Peter Thiel. They've all been involved from the very beginning. You know, and so I learned that, and I'm like, well, that really changed my perception of things. I thought this was a normal Trump guy who just blew up on Twitter. No, he was working for Clearview AI. He's working for Peter Thiel. And a lot of them were. You know, that's just the tip of the iceberg. Jared Kushner ran the campaign, then ran the White House. And Kushner is a Lubavitcher. Kushner, and if you know about Chabad Lubavitch, it's pretty freaky stuff. Kushner's at 666 Fifth Avenue. That's his address. He's a scam artist, and he's tight with Bibi Netanyahu. And they get all this money from Adelson. And, you know, anything that was about Russia, there was also a line to Israel and the Emirates running through it as well. That's the missing part that they never talked about. There was a piece in The Nation about this. They said that's the collusion that no one talks about in the election, was the role of Israel in 16. So I'm just rethinking a lot of things lately, and I have no regrets, you know, because it's part of the process. That's part of the awakening process. When you're coming to the surface, you do have to sift through a lot of bullshit. So I think it was earnest, and I was idealistic, and, you know, I think a lot of people went through the same thing, and you have to start somewhere. So I have no regrets, but I think I was wrong about a lot of it. I didn't understand the scope and scale of what was going on.
About how deep it goes and the ties and where the money really lies. They say if you want to find the truth, just follow the money. And
yeah.
Do you think Trump is even a Christian?
Well, I mean, he's one of these cultural Christians, you know.
Yeah, that's a funny word.
Unfortunately, that's the thing. I mean, it's no secret Christians have an apostasy problem. It's not being transmitted from one generation to the next. And, you know, that's a symptom of modernity and feminism and a lot of things. And I think that Trump clearly is not a pious Christian. You know, he's about as Christian as unfortunately a lot of people are. So I think he has a vague notion that he believes in God, but I don't think he has a deep faith.
No, I don't think so either. I don't think he ever really did. And I think that the Trump movement was the religion was America. Like, that is if you go to a Trump rally, you go to the GOP, you go to TPUSA, people worship Trump like he's a prophet, like he's an idol. There's even videos of guys getting pulled over and they start praying to Trump. If you see like the way these boomers talk about him, and they, with, you know, almost fear, without really knowing what it's about, because they just like him and his stance and his aura, they pretty much see him as a religious figure, and they borderline worship him. But he was part of the swamp that he always claimed to drain. And I related to you saying that when you were first working on the Trump campaign, because the same thing happened to me. I remember saying like he's an outsider. First, I liked Bernie because he was an outsider, and then Trump was I realized he was the true outsider of the time. And then there'd be like boomer conspiracy like chemtrail people, and they'd be like he's part of the swamp too, and I'm like no, he's not. But you realize that the whole time that probably was the case. But that's what. And again, I want to ask you this because I was looking at your bio, and you put America first, and then Christ is King second. Is there a reason for that?
Not particularly. I mean, mainly because my show is called America First. But
What
it's not a ranking. Obviously, I'm a
Yeah.
Christian first.
What I really liked about Ye 24 was that it fixed this problem within politics where money corrupts people. You remember when Ye was always about sourcing all of the laws strictly to the Bible. It was about developing Christian Sharia law that doesn't exist because there is no specific Christian law. There is just in the Old Testament there's law, but the New Testament abolished that, so there is no specific law. And you always talk. I think you're probably like one of the best examples of a Christian in the space. Like if you see the other people that have come out, like these guys like Ryan Garcia, for example, they don't know anything about Christianity. Like the attacks they make, and they'll claim and they'll die in this thing of Christ is King, but they don't really know at all, and they fall a lot in the salvation of it. Your conviction with Christianity is similar to the way a Muslim is, where we believe that we're saved by works. Like we have to work every day, we have to worship every day, we have to be a good person. You don't have sex out of wedlock, you don't drink, you don't do these things. Do you think that's something like Ye 24 sourcing, or like a Catholic Taliban in America? Do you think that's still possible?
Well, we Catholics actually don't believe in salvation by works. We believe that we're saved by grace. That's how technically we're saved. But we believe that our faith is dead without works. So that's the debate between Catholics and Protestants. Both Protestants and Catholics believe that we're saved by God's grace. We cannot save ourselves. God has to save us. But Protestants say, well, all I have to do is say, I believe in God and I'm saved. And Catholics say, yeah, but if you don't act like it, then is it really sincere? Because if you really believed it, we believe that what we call charity, Catholics have, and charity doesn't mean just almsgiving, but it means loving your fellow man. We believe that proceeds from faith, that it starts with faith and then hope and then charity, which is the love of the fellow man. And it's sort of like if you don't have this blossoming into charity, do you really have faith? You can say that. And this is where, Protestants, there's a little bit of, I think, a logical problem. It's like, okay, so a person could be an irredeemable, unrepentant, complete sinner, but hey, they nominally say they're Christian, so they're good. Catholics say there has to be a sincere repentance. We have to ask for forgiveness and mean it. And we have to believe in God and mean it. And if you mean it, you're going to act like it. But I do agree. Protestantism is a big part of the issue. That is really a big part of where a lot of our problems began, this Bible alone Christianity, because the difference, actually, the irony, Protestantism is actually probably more similar to Islam in certain ways than Catholicism, because Protestants, like Muslims, have an emphasis on the book. Although Protestants view our book differently than Muslims view the Quran, they are still all about the book. And that's where they believe we have to go back to scripture. There's no role for a clergy or a hierarchy, or there's no role for, an authority figure like the Pope. We have a personal relationship with God mediated only by the Bible. And Catholics believe, actually, we have a church. They believe that the church came first. Christ had a ministry. He had 12 disciples, and then the ministry grew, and eventually then the ministry put together and canonized the Bible. But that without the hymns and without people coming together and without the church with the readings on top of that, then you don't really have what Christ created. So there's an interesting comparison. And I would say that, the Trump phenomenon, if you look at Trump's, his his engagement with the religion comes from this speaker, this pastor named Norman Vincent Peale. A lot of people don't talk about this anymore. They used to. That Trump used to be a big fan of this Protestant pastor, motivational speaker named Norman Vincent Peale. And he wrote a book called The Power of Positive Thinking. And it kind of gets into this, they call it the prosperity gospel stuff, where Protestants believe that if you're praying and you believe in God, then you get rich and you know your life is good and your life goes well for you. And that's a big part of the American culture is very Protestant. There's a lot of Southern stuff where this is the land of great awakenings and things. And I think there is a big overlap with our political culture as well. And so somebody like Trump, who's real, and there's also an overlap with capitalism too. The power of positive thinking, Trump, that scene they had in Grand Rapids, the Betsy DeVos and Prince family up there, they had a multi-level marketing thing deeply connected to a Protestant church there. It all kind of comes together, and it does form this like toxic blend of what you might call Americanism, what you might call an Americanist faith. And I think you're exactly right. You can't save America without getting back to Christ, which means getting back to being Catholic actually first. And America didn't start out as a Catholic nation, but if it's going to persist, it has to wind up as one eventually.
Yeah, the Americanism religion you talk about basically just sounds like a Jewified Christianity. Capitalism, again, a Jewish ideology. Protestantism, I think, when did that originate? That was like 600 years after Catholicism?
16th century. So I mean, Catholicism we say is eternal, but it's been the 1500s, so 1500 years after Christ. Yeah.
So this Americanism idea that if you pray, you're going to get a lot of money. That's very Jewish, and again, like with the Judeo-Christian values, thinking that the two can coexist because the Old Testament has laws. It seems like this problem is always going to happen. We'll get another Trump situation happen for the next 10, 20, 30 years if there isn't some sort of Sharia law that supersedes the American ideology. And I'm wondering, can you explain what does the Catholic Taliban, what does that look like? Because people say that I talk about that too much, but I do think you could win in 2036. What does that look like? What does the Catholic Taliban look like in America?
Well, it's a recognition that all aspects of American political life and society come from Christ at the center. Well, Christ and our European heritage is a huge part of it as well. And so it's just a public recognition of what was private. A big part of where America went wrong is this Establishment Clause, which really didn't get taken advantage of until the 20th century. The Establishment Clause, which says Congress will not establish a state religion. Because when you look at the American founding in the 18th century, each one of the respective colonies actually had a state church. Each one of the 13, almost all of them, had a state church where the state authorized a specific church, a specific Protestant church. And so at the very beginning of the country, it was like a Christian state. We did have a form of Christian nationalism. And it wasn't until and we had religious laws on the books. We had laws on the books regarding things that now are considered the purview of, people say it's the private domain, things like sodomy and adultery and homosexuality and even things like race mixing. There were laws on the books in states, and it was even adjudicated at the Supreme Court. It was not 100 years ago, within the last 100 years, where Supreme Court justices said that, of course, we're not going to allow gay marriage and sodomy. It's abominable. It's the oldest law of man. And it wasn't until, and the Jews take a lot of credit for this, the 20th century, that they began to drive a wedge and say, no, that's the realm of the private domain. If you want to have pornography and sodomy and gay marriage and surrogacy and contraceptives and abortion, well, that's really your right. That's your prerogative. And we can bring in as many immigrants as possible because this is a melting pot. And it doesn't matter where they come from or what they believe or what they're about. it didn't really happen until the United States fully liberalized in the past 100 years that everything started to come apart when we lost our
That's why he's
Christian
a
faith, we lost
supremacist,
our
bro.
European
White
heritage
supremacist.
and our values and so on. So it's just about creating a closed society. We need to have a president that's in office that says, you know what, this is a Christian nation. This is a white nation. It's a European nation. And I don't think that means you can't have non-white people living in it. But we can all recognize that if America was 90% Nigerian, it wouldn't be America. If America was 90% Italian, it wouldn't be America. If it was 90% Brazilian, it would be something else, you know? And so we need to have a president that lays that down. And we do need to circumscribe liberty. Everybody holds liberty as the highest value, which now means freedom to be a degenerate, freedom to be a piece of go on drugs, get fat, cut your balls off, be a fag, do whatever you want. That's not what freedom means. Freedom means actually freedom from temptation and sin, which enslaves us. Freedom means you can start a business. Freedom means you can get married and have kids and take a stroll in the park and be a good person. Freedom doesn't mean you can be a total, loser. So that is kind of the recapitulation of American political theory that needs to happen. I think Catholicism plays a big part in that.
I understand wanting to limit immigration the same way Japan does or other nations like this that have a strong economy. But how could you justify no race mixing or limited, say a Nigerian Catholic wanted to enter? If it's Catholicism first, there's nothing in the Bible that says that the race mixing is a sin or that, immigration is a sin.
But St. Thomas Aquinas and the Catechism of the Catholic Church also say that a nation is not obligated to bring in more immigrants than it can assimilate and handle, and ones that don't respect our customs and our culture. And so the problem with immigration is not necessarily that you get some immigrants. The problem is they're fundamentally changing what the country is. And the United States will not be the same country if it's majority African versus when it started, when it was 90% Northern European. And so there's nothing, and people always say that. They say there's this tension between race and Christianity, but it's not true. I mean, for example, the Arab race has a very special role in Islam. Nobody can say, we're going to write the Quran in every language. We're going to say the Quran in English now. Muslims would lose their minds if they heard that.
Well, that's not a race thing. That's a language thing. Like it was revealed in the Arabic language, but even Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, he said that Arabs do not hold any superiority over whites or blacks, and that there's no, when we pray, Arabs have no some sort of superiority in Islam.
But they do have a special place in the history of Islam evangelizing if you could call it evangelization, or some might call it conquest, but, taking over the whole Middle East and spreading out. And it is their language. And that is the land where, it's the Arab Peninsula where the religion came from and where the holy sites are. So, being Arab is quintessential to being Muslim. Now, being white isn't quintessential to being Catholic or anything like that, but the Catholic faith did evangelize the European Catholic Church did evangelize the entire world. And so taking away Latin and taking away the European race, I view it similarly. It's just not appropriate.
But Jesus spoke Aramaic. Like he wasn't speaking Latin. And because it was revealed in the Arab Peninsula, it doesn't mean that Islam is an Arabic religion. That's just where it began. Same thing with Christianity. You can't, there's nothing in the Bible that says that this is a white religion just because it was evangelized by whites.
But I would say that it's easy for Muslims to talk about this universalism, but mark my words, if the same thing was happening to the Arab world that is happening to the United States, which is the death of the Arab race, if the same thing was happening to Islam, which is the erosion of traditional Arab culture or Muslim culture, Muslims would not be okay with that. But it's always weaponized against Christians. People say, well, you're a universalist religion. But at the same time, God created the nations. We believe that God created the nations and the church is the mother of the nations, and we want to keep them. We think there's something beautiful about the fact that Spain has its own cathedrals and its own culture, and Germany has its own, and France, and so on. And these nations are being erased from the world. And same thing, and the United States arguably is somewhat different in ways which, it's kind of beyond the scope of this conversation. But, there's something wrong about that too. And there's nothing inherent in Catholicism that says you can't preserve your identity.
That's true. But
and also the Bible is written in New Testament was in Koine Greek, not Aramaic.
Yeah. But there's no such thing as like, what do you think Muslim culture is?
Well, it's the architecture, it's the language, it's the way you dress, it's all of it, because Muhammad came from the Arabian Peninsula.
Yeah, but that has no basis in Quran or Hadith, in scripture. That has nothing to do with Sharia law. So it goes back to the question I'm asking, like, what is the Catholic law that you would instill? The culture that you're applying, that's Arabic culture, but that's not synonymous with Islam.
I'm saying that Islam has a tradition, just like Catholics and Christians have a tradition. And I think tradition should be kept as well. And as far as religious law goes, I don't know if I would, you're always hung up on the race. Look, we're both race mixed, okay? I'm not 100% white. You're not 100% anything. You're all over the place. But, and the thing is, like, I don't think there's anything necessarily immoral about race mixing. I'm against it. I'm talking more strictly about immigration than I am the mixing. The mixing... One, let's acknowledge the mixing is being promoted. That's the part, everybody always wants to pretend when it comes to race mixing that, I woke up one day and said, I don't like different people getting together. It's in every commercial. Yeah. Every commercial, it's a non-white male and a white female. Every TV show. Like, that is just in the same way that they're pushing homosexuality and transgenderism, and it's very overt, they are pushing the mixing.
That's true.
Now, there always has been mixing. And I was a product of it as well. My grandmother married a Mexican guy in the 50s, and it wasn't done back then. So it's always been going on. But it's being promoted, I think, for sin. You have to really question the motivations of why people are doing that. So, if it was happening, and you always have some of it, although it's marginal, well, we can be tolerant. But it's being promoted very heavily with immigration, with the low fertility rates. And it combines where it's like people clearly don't want white people to be around anymore. When you take it all together.
Yeah, it's very clearly Jewish version. Just before you came on the call, I was watching the Minecraft movie trailer, and I hadn't seen it before the stream. And it's like right away you get the oh hell nah, and you get a fat transgender person, and then like it's two white kids, and then around them is a fat tranny and a fat black woman, and you're like, I see what you're trying to do. And then Jack Black shows up, and I didn't even know this. I look up his early life, and he's Jewish. It's clearly that Jewish people want to destroy Christianity and the unity that white people have, because they're going to be easier to conquer when they're divided. No, I mean, that's very clear. That's very clear. But I understand. Yeah, but race mixing, there's nothing sinful about that. There's nothing that's wrong in Christianity about that. But I understand your qualms with that. But where would you? This is something that I remember, like. Questioning this at Ye 24, like, if everything's going to be sourced to the Bible, where does that lost, like, what does that look like exactly? And would you listen to the Pope if you were president, because the Pope is the figure of authority in Catholicism? Would he be in charge of you?
We wouldn't be in charge, but he would give counsel. He would give counsel to the nations, and of course, I would recognize the Pope's authority in a certain sense. And a moral authority. Obviously, the Pope has political views that I disagree with, but on matters of morality, of course, you should have counsel with the Pope. I mean, Catholics believe that he's the representative of Jesus in the world. And he isn't Jesus, but he represents him, stands in for. So, of course, I would do that. And as far as what it would look like, we need to get back to having religion play a central role in American public life. That's the thing. Like, you go at the DNC, I don't think they said Jesus Christ one time, and this is a Christian nation. Like, what year is it? Yeah. Like, for Jews, they have a calendar. For Muslims, they have a calendar. For Chinese people, Indians, they have a calendar. We have a calendar too. It starts when Christ was born, before Christ, and in the year of the Lord. And yet you wouldn't know that if you go to the DNC. And practically, if you go to the RNC, at the RNC, they had some Sikh prayer to Wagadugu or, yeah, right, exactly. Yeah. And and here's the problem is, if there is no, and Islam is about submission to God, In Christianity, it's about love of God, but it comes from a fear as well. So there is obedience. We would say it's obedience to God. We wouldn't put it in quite the same terms, but it's very similar in a sense. And when you get away from that, which is fundamentally about humility, recognizing the limitations of mankind, recognizing the inherent sinfulness of some of our desires and some of our appetites, if you're not worshiping God, if you're not subordinated and obedient to God, who are you obedient to or what? The devil, Satan, you're talking about just before I came on, idol worship, money, fame, sex, power, whatever. So, people approach religion and public life with some trepidation. They're hesitant and fearful about what it represents. I'm fearful about the opposite, which is if you don't have Jesus and the Mother Mary and the Catholic Church in the middle of it, which represent goodness, self-sacrificing love, humility, love of God, the eternal, the transcendent, the immanent, what are you worshiping? And you see, it's totally hollow. At the Democrat convention, it's abortion. It's literally killing babies. And they say it's about defects and rape. No, we all know it's a form of birth control. We all know men and women are having a lot of promiscuous sex. Sometimes the contraceptives fail and they get pregnant. And then they say, I don't want to put up with this kid. Let's kill it. And if you see what abortion is, it is murder. Now, people will say, well, what if you take a morning after pill? Well, I suppose, Catholics say that's the same. I understand why people say in principle it's different. But you're talking about, in some cases, a pregnancy that's, 4 or 5 months in. That's like a baby. And it does look something like child sacrifice because you're killing something that otherwise would have been a person out of convenience because you'd rather have sex because you're overcome with lust. And that has become the center. That's in the heart of the dominant political party. Like that is the uni party of America, the Democrats. And that's their agenda, is abortion. So without Jesus at the center, Mother Mary and baby Jesus, you get the inverse, which is abortion, killing a mother killing her child. Instead of the Virgin Mary obediently bearing the Savior, the fruit of the womb, saying yes to the angel Gabriel and having the child that saves mankind, women are killing their own children. And that's what the Democrats are running on. And there's no party that's saying the Republicans are afraid to even stand on it. They're saying, yeah, we're kind of pro-choice too. So that's what you get without religion and public life. So
it sounds like submission. The way you talk about it is identical to what we believe in as Muslims. We do love Allah. We fear Allah. God. That's the same word. And part of that love is worship, and that's part of what we're supposed to do. Part of submission is worship, because we believe that our natural state is going to worship something. And you notice that even with atheists, the disbelievers, liberals, they end up worshiping something at the end of the day. That's our natural state. We're going to always going to find something that is in charge of us. And if that's not God, it ends up being, for the destiny atheist type, it ends up being your desires. It ends up being all the things that we restrict as Muslims. Like we don't believe in drinking, sex out of wedlock. We restrict a lot of our innate desires, things that are going to give us instant dopamine, in order to serve Allah and to do what we're supposed to do, because that's what He wants us to do. So it sounds like what you're describing is submission. I've never heard. I'm surprised you disagree with that.
Well, because there's submission kind of implies, there are themes in submission, which are like humility, and recognition of authority and recognition of dominion. And in that sense, it's similar, because we approach God humbly, and, we do recognize His authority and sovereignty. But I guess the aspect I disagree, what Christians say is that God is love. And so it's a fear of God, it's obedience of God, but on the fundamental level, we would describe it as love. Submission to me sounds a bit more coercive, whereas love is a bit more voluntary. It's a choosing of, in the sense that the creation story of Christianity is that God gave us a choice. We have to choose God. He wants us to want Him back, in a sense. He loved us first, and we love Him back. And then we have to apply that to everybody. We have to love the whole body of the church, the whole body of Christ as we love God, which is to say, we love other people. That's why Christ says the greatest commandment is to love each other. And the greatest thing a person could do is lay down their life for their fellow man. So I suppose, and I'm not an expert on Islam, so I can't make a perfect contrast, but I guess that would be the main difference. Because, of course, Christ dying on the cross is the epitome of a loving sacrifice, God dying for us out of endless love. And so that's where, I suppose it's a little bit different. I don't think there's any analog in Islam.
Yeah, I mean, it's similar, but it still is. We're going to worship and we love God because he created everything, and it's just the objective reality. God exists, God created everything. So naturally, we worship and we serve him because that's what we're supposed to do, and that's our everyday function. And again, I want more Christians in America to realize, and Trump is destroying that by posting negative things about Islam for no reason, is how many similarities we have. We love Jesus is mentioned in the Quran more than Muhammad, peace be upon him. Even Mary, for example, I grew up in a Catholic church before I was a disbeliever, before I was an atheist for a long time in college and this. And Mary, if you see the stained glass windows, she has her head covered the way Muslims do. Muslim women follow the example of Maryam. And if you read the Jewish Talmud, they believe that Mary was a liar. They believe that she was, they believe very negative things about her, the words that I don't want to use. And they believe that Jesus is literally burning in excrement and feces. That's what the Talmud says. So people like Trump will speak about Judeo-Christian values. He'll use words like Palestinian as an insult, but he doesn't realize that if he is a Christian, what we have in common is 99% of the issue. Again, we don't believe Christ is God. The word Christ in Latinized Greek, it means Messiah, which we also believe. We believe Jesus is going to return the same way you do and defeat the Antichrist. That's what this all goes down to. If you see the celebrities with the one eye, if you look at the dollar bill with the Egyptian pyramid and it has the one eye on it, that's all allegiance to the Dajjal, which is the Antichrist. The Jews literally believe that they have a different Messiah and that he's going to kill. They hate Jesus. They want to kill Jesus when he comes back. We believe in the same Messiah, and we have that in common. But so many Christians, and I would maybe say so many Americans, will be more specific, have no idea about this, and they don't take the time to look into this.
Well, they don't recognize the what Judaism is. I would say it's less, because here's the thing. I mean, Muslims and Christians, there's some similarities, but they are incompatible in the sense that we do disagree about the nature of God, and so that is something that is intractable, and Muslims and Christians want to evangelize. So we have similarities. We can kind of stand next to each other, but it does get a little tricky. The third element coming in is what really kind of unites us, which is that we're both under occupation by the Jews, in a sense. Mm-hmm. I mean, you've got Jewish influence in the Muslim world, you've got it in the Christian world, and the thing that Christians don't get right is that Judaism is not the religion of the Old Testament, because after the Jews rejected Christ, and before that also, but in the intervening 2,000 years, they have developed a completely different religion, whether it's mystical Judaism with the Kabbalah or whether it's legalistic Judaism with the Talmud, and there's tension and fusion, and there's an interplay between those things. But they have developed a completely different religion, and Christians have it in their mind like you've got the Old Testament and the New Testament, and the Jews just got off before the New Testament. They got off at their stop, and so they're the first episode and we're the sequel. But it's not true, because they continue to develop a religion, and so you could ask somebody, is the Zohar a Christian text? I mean, how does that have any relation to Christianity? The Zohar came in the Middle Ages. They say it goes back to Moses or Abraham, but the Zohar's got nothing to do with us. And the Talmud didn't come until 400 years after Christ. And they say that the rabbis have been debating the Mishnah during the time of Christ, but they didn't put it down and they didn't codify it, and, they didn't complete it until 1,000 years later, practically. So, and that's where it really is a form of ignorance. And throughout history, this has happened where, for example, the disputation in Paris or in Barcelona or in other cities in Europe, Christians found out about what the Jews were up to. They found out in Paris that the Jews had a Talmud because the first Judeo-Christians were Jewish converts to Christianity. Mm-hmm. And they went to the king and they said, hey, you'll never believe what the Jews are doing. These are not the people of the Old Testament. They're not people of the book. They're practicing witchcraft. They believe in mysticism. They have this Talmud. And they held a disputation, like a trial, like a debate about what's in the Talmud. And when the Catholics found out about what's in it, they burned the Talmud. They organized an organized burning of the Talmud across the whole city, and they torched every copy of it.
Alhamdulillah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So Christians just really have no idea what they're dealing with. Even, Candace Owens brought this up with Rabbi Shmuley. This Rebbe of the Chabad Lubavitchers, Rabbi Schneerson, who they worship. And Schneerson is considered a messiah, and the Lubavitchers are everywhere. Kushner's a Lubavitcher. Millet is a Lubavitcher. The Lubavitchers have an audience with Putin and Netanyahu, and they were in the White House. And Schneerson believed that we're not human beings. He believes that non-Jews have no souls and we're not human beings. We're cattle, and we should worship the Jews because they're the ones that, according to the Kabbalistic belief, they're supposed to collect the shards and protect the divine spark. And it's all this nonsense. And Christians just have no idea about any of that. So you are right. There's a deep ignorance about the fact that Jews run America and what they actually believe.
I mean, that's the root of the issue. There's not an ethnicity problem with Jews. That's what Muslims believe. We don't believe that the Jewish ethnicity or whatever, that they're inherently evil. It's the tribalism that you see in the Talmud. You're smiling because maybe you disagree, but it's the tribalism. It's the belief. This is the root of all evil, is idol worship. And they believe that they are the chosen people, that they had a different connection with God, and that they're the master race and they're superior to everybody else. Rabbinical Judaism, because there's so many different Jewish sects, Rabbinical Judaism is the belief that like rabbis are able to communicate with God. They're pretty much like walking prophets. They have some sort of divinity. This is the real issue. And I want to hear now, what is it specifically with Islam that you disagree with? And because as Muslims, we believe that Jesus never asked to be worshipped. That Jesus never, when he was alive, there's no source of when he said, like, pray to me. There's no source where he ever claimed to be divine. In fact, many times we believe that he said that he claimed to be a prophet. And even the slogan I see all the time, whenever I tweet about Islam, I have so many groypers that reply, Christ is king. You have a very strong support base on X. And I like a lot of them because we agree about so much. But they say Christ is king, and it got me thinking, like, what does that even mean? I've said it before at Fuentes Rally too, because I think for America to actually become, to have Taliban rules is unlikely, and it's more likely that Christians have some sort of Sharia law. But then I realized, like, well, where is that? Because there's no law, there's no Christian law specifically. And if you look at the phrase Christ is king, because if you believe Christ is God, why not just say Christ is God? If you say Christ is king, he literally wasn't king. He was never in charge. He was never the ruler of anything. Muhammad, peace be upon him, he was actually the ruler. He governed the Arabian Peninsula at the time. He was. You could say that he was a king, but Jesus is king. I don't understand where this phrase came from.
Well, the disagreement I have with Islam is I believe that Christ died on the cross and was resurrected. Muslims believe he was replaced at the last second by a body double and ascended into heaven and said to God, I don't know why they're worshiping.
That's true,
we
bro.
all believe that. We believe that the crucifixion was an historical event and the resurrection was an historical event. And that's the basis of we believe in the divinity of Christ. And if you believed that Christ died on the cross, you'd be a Christian too. That's the disagreement. And as far as Christ being king, well, Christ said, my kingdom is not of this world. And that was the source of the Jews' frustration because the Jews were expecting a Messiah, but they were expecting a King David. They were expecting a conquering Messiah who would be the king and make Israel the center of the universe. That's what they wanted. And God didn't give them what they wanted. God gave them a different kind of a king. And that's why they mocked him. In the gospel story, they put on his head a crown of thorns and they gave him a reed and they said, oh, here he is, King of the Jews. They put him on a cross. Here he is, the King of the Jews. And they mocked him. They mocked his claim to divinity. But Christ said, I didn't come to conquer and be a king. I'm from another kingdom, a different kind of kingdom. And so that's what we mean. And we do say that Christ is God. We say Christ is God. We say Christ is Lord. We believe that Christ is just as much God as the Father and the Holy Spirit. You know, and he did claim to be God. He said, before Abraham was, I am. Because that's what God's name is I am. And when Jesus said that, that's when the Jews said he's a blasphemer. They said he's claiming to be God, kill him. And that's really the thing is, you know, there's little dispute. You know, when you look at the stories about Christianity, they date back really to the 1st century. And even the non-Christian sources date back to the same time. They're contemporary. There's no dispute that the crucifixion happened. There is dispute about the resurrection. Obviously, secular people don't believe it happened. But there's really, you either believe that Christ was God or he wasn't. But there's really no middle ground. You know, some people like to say, well, he was like this great social teacher. Well, he was some other thing. He said he was God. So either he said he was God and he rose from the dead, or he wasn't and he died and that was it. But he did live, he did get crucified, and he did claim to be that. And that's where I think the Muslim position almost makes no sense, because it says there was, by magic, a body double that kind of came in. I don't even know how that happens. No one talks about that.
No,
but
it's not magic. They say that
believe.
the body was replaced at the last second and Jesus was ascended. And at the same time, like,
There you go.
like when you say, we believe that God breathed and he said, be, and Jesus appeared. The same way you bring up that verse where you say, I am. Does that, can you really say that that's a source of him claiming to be God?
Absolutely. Well, that's God's name. And that's what he meant. And I am.
That's God's name?
Mm-hmm. Yes. And that's why it was blasphemous. He said, before Abraham was, I am. And what does that mean? It means that, and you know, that's what God revealed his name to be. And so he, you know, and Jesus was Jewish, and he was saying that to the Jews. Of course, he was in Judea. He was in Israel, or the land of Israel. And so when he said that to them, he knew what he was saying. They knew what he was saying. And that's why he was killed. That's why they wanted him dead. And that's why they wanted Barabbas instead of Jesus, because they said he's a blasphemer. He's a heretic. He's claiming to be God. And so he did claim to be God. And
of course, we disagree. We disagree. I mean, at no point, like, there's nothing that we could see where Jesus said, "Worship me" specifically. And again, like, if we're gonna follow, because we're gonna say, like, we follow in his footsteps, Jesus worshipped God. You know, he put his head to the floor. We could have, of course, this debate has gone on for a long time, and we don't need to go in there forever. But I do want to. I'm not sure if you specifically described, like, what is that going to look like? Because if you look at your beliefs, Nick, and everything that you're rejecting of abortion, of homosexuality, of the infiltration, and how ideas and culture and belief systems, morality, all that gets subverted without religion, Islam and Sharia law fits into your beliefs like pretty identically.
It's almost like you want me to say, you're right, Sharia, we have to accept Sharia law. Like, I told you what it's going to look like. We want to get rid of the Establishment Clause. We want a president that seeks counsel from the Pope. We want some laws that govern morality, like restoring some of the basic ones. You know, but we don't have the same. I mean, you're an Islamist in the sense that, you know, Muslims believe that you should have a theocracy, right? That you should have a religious law that governs civil matters as well. And Catholics don't have it in quite the same way, but we want to have a confessional state that is, I mean, my ideal state is a Catholic king that is subordinate to the Pope, but that probably won't happen in my lifetime. So, I mean, ideally what we'd like to do is just get rid of liberalism altogether, and this idea that it's everyone should vote and there should be elections. I mean, we would want a king and maybe some kind of a you know, Republican system beneath that, aristocratic Republican system underneath that. But, you know, we would want a Catholic king, ideally, and we would want the king to function like the priest of the nation. And we would want something like that. Catholics would. Real Catholics would.
So
And they would look
you
like
want a
that.
monarchy in America?
Yeah, that would be the ideal. That would be the dream.
How realistic is that?
It's not very realistic. It's about as realistic as an Islamist caliphate.
Yeah, that's a fair comparison.
We're both being undermined by Jews, you know, but Muslims, look, here's my gripe, but Muslims always want to say, hey, come on, we're best buddies. But then they're always like, stop believing in Jesus. And, you know, the West is so sick. It's like, okay, so it feels like we're getting a little heat from Muslims all the time. Like, but
no, we believe in Jesus. We just don't believe in worshiping him. We believe in his teachings.
Right.
100%.
But you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, I get it. But do you agree with yeah, I don't want to, we don't need to, we're not going to change each other's minds, but do you believe in the idea of confession?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, that was one, like, when I grew up Catholic that I never I could never get around, because the way you live, you know, I've said this before, the way you live and that righteousness is different from the way a lot of Christians view salvation, where Jesus saves you from all sin. And you see that a lot with a lot of modern Christians now, a lot of modern Christian influencers, where they sin publicly, they profit off of this sin from porn, from gambling and this stuff, and they say Jesus saves. And they don't, what they do, their actions, their righteousness doesn't matter, because Jesus will save altogether. But yeah,
we do believe that. Catholics do believe that, because every sin, even a minor sin, damns us to hell, because every sin offends God. We have an infinite God. Every sin offends God infinitely. And so, and no sin is permitted into heaven. You know, we believe we go to heaven, we have the beatific vision, we encounter and see God. You can't be in the presence of God with sin because sin alters your soul. So we believe that the only way, and you know, we believe that before Jesus came, nobody was saved. That from Adam until Jesus Christ, everyone went to a form of hell. And it wasn't until Jesus Christ died on the cross and then descended into hell and liberated the souls that were in hell and let the righteous one go into heaven that anyone got into heaven. Because it wasn't until Jesus saved everybody by dying. God had to suffer and die perfectly. There had to be a blood atonement for those sins. Otherwise, they could not really be forgiven. And once that happened, then people could become actually forgiven, and then they could actually be. That's why we say save the world, because he freed the souls in hell and he freed everybody else from death, and we don't have to die. We get to live forever with God, and we get to be in heaven. And the only way to access the salvation is what we would call being in a state of grace. And being in a state of grace means that your soul is clean, and we do that by confessing the sins. And we confess the sins, we say we're sorry, and the priest absolves us just as Jesus did, or like his apostles. He granted the apostles the ability to forgive the sins on his behalf. And so when Jesus forgives the sins, they go away, and then we could be permitted into heaven. But Catholics also have a doctrine of purgatory, which is that if you die and your soul isn't in a perfect state, the sins do have to be accounted for. And so purgatory, we believe, is similar in a sense to hell. It's extremely painful, and it's a form of punishment for every sin that wasn't accounted for. And then when you achieve this kind of purity, then you go to heaven. But it still does, the function of the grace and salvation, or rather the salvation is the grace. It is still Jesus. It's just that Catholics believe that in order to be saved, you do have to repent the sins, and you do have to try to live a good life. That's the thing that people always get wrong. People think that Catholics believe, if I'm a good person, I go to heaven. We don't believe that. We believe that if you're repentant and if you have faith, you'll act in a certain way. You'll still sin, and you still require the sacraments. That's the difference. We have the sacraments, but we still, like Protestants, believe that God's grace saves us. They just believe that they believe, like Muslims, all you have to do is say the magic words. Like with you, it's, Muhammad's the prophet and so on. With Protestants, they believe if you say
it's
Jesus
more
Christ
there's works
God.
involved, and you have to give charity. There's pillars of everything you have to do. You have to be a good
Well, you
person.
know what I mean. You
Yeah, the basis is saying that we worship God and God alone, but there's works involved. I hadn't heard it described like that. I didn't know that there was that I hadn't heard about the purgatory before. Um, do you believe in original sin?
I do, yes.
Okay, so do you? This is, it sounds like a facetious question. Like when you see a baby and the baby hasn't been baptized, that baby is corrupted.
Yes, yeah, everyone's corrupted by original sin. Because think about it this way: every baby left unattended would die. And we believe that death is the punishment for the disobedience in the garden. That was the original sin. And so things like death and suffering, and even the pain that a mother suffers when she bears a child, the need to eat, and aging, and all those things are a symptom, because we believe that Adam and Eve were kind of like different beings. They were perfect. They didn't die. They didn't need to eat. They didn't need the things that we need. They were made to live forever, and they didn't need to have sex, and they had no shame, and they lived. If you read the Bible, they lived 1,000 years. And so there is this degradation over the generations because of the poison of original sin. But we were in a perfected state in the garden, and it was the sin of disobedience and the curse that we got because of it, which is why all these things happen. So yeah, and that's why we require baptism.
Yeah, why would babies that aren't Adam have to pay for the sins that they didn't commit?
Well, it's sort of a mystical, spiritual reason that, because Christians believe that, we have two natures. We have a soul and we have a body. So we have a flesh and blood, but we also have an immaterial, we would say lacking substance, but having essence. We have a soul as well. And so the soul was changed by original sin, and the soul cannot be in the company of God if it has sin. So it's kind of like a mystical explanation, because I understand what you're saying. You look at a baby, and a baby is unblemished, and a baby is innocent, and a
Pure.
baby looks new.
Yeah.
But its soul is different because of the effect of original sin.
It's like a cute baby goo goo gaga with the corrupt soul. It's just this evil soul.
That's unfortunately the effect of because that is the creation story in Genesis. That we were banished from the garden, and now we're fundamentally changed by that.
Was Jesus baptized?
Yes, yeah, by John the Baptist.
Okay. What about turning it? Last Christian question. But do you believe in turning the other cheek?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Christians believe that turning the other cheek means, like, you have to let people kill you. Like, if someone comes at you with a gun, you have to be like, bring it on, like, send me to hell, send me to heaven, but it doesn't. It means, in the context of the Bible, it really means forgiving like petty insults. It's really more about humility. And of course, Christians are not supposed to seek revenge. So turn the other cheek means, you're supposed to overlook petty insults and not, it's kind of like a spirit of not being vengeful and wrathful in general. But it doesn't mean you can't like defend or protect yourself, if that's where you're going with that. Because that's what people always say. They're like, if you don't let someone kill you, you're not a Christian, because Christ would have said, turn the other cheek. I mean, you can defend yourself and you can protect yourself, but it means you have to have kind of a forgiving attitude, magnanimity.
So, if someone slaps you in the face, do you forgive?
You're supposed to, yeah. I mean,
That's not you.
Supposed to get, if someone's attacking you,
Yeah.
You're supposed to get away from them.
Or
but if someone
you chuck the Sprite right back at them.
Well, that was a self-defense situation. Okay. I don't know if you have the situational awareness, but that In-N-Out was about to blow up.
Yeah, it was.
There were I identified a lot of hostiles, a lot of red dots on my radar on the mini map. If you notice. So I was like, hey, we got to get, and we did. We left, didn't we?
We did. We got out of there.
We left.
We
turned the other cheek.
It could. I don't know if we turned the other cheek. We threw. Well, Yeah, that situation. I think the sprite made the enemies more alert in the situation. The UAV radar was red. They were highlighted. But even though
Yeah,
you're
they became red.
yeah, I watched a lot of your stuff, and you're doing very very well right now. I think your career is probably at an all-time high, is it not?
Yeah, I think so. I think the reality of my career is that I really got set back after the 6th. After J6, I got totally ruined and I had to build it back really from nothing. I literally had nothing after January 6th in terms of money, in terms of everything. So I built it all back and now it's probably the biggest it's ever been. So yeah, things are going pretty well thanks to Rumble and X mainly.
Yeah.
And you as well. I mean, so what's going on with you? You're on X now. Is that real?
What do you mean I'm on X?
A SNEAKO update said you got a contract with X. Is that just?
I don't even know what he posts sometimes. Like,
Okay. I don't want to push it there.
That's not true.
Do you get $100 million from Saudi Arabia?
No, he messaged me. He said that you unfollowed him. He said.
Yeah. Okay. Because Tristan Tate tweets a video where they're like, oh, Nick Fuentes is so funny. And then what does your updates channel do? Post a clip of me saying they should be in jail. What the like, what are you trying to do, man?
He's
that?
He's upset.
So I soft blocked him.
You did?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, he's sad
Soft
about
blocked.
that. He's sad about that. I think I told him to delete it. It's gone now.
Good. Okay, good.
Yeah.
I mean, look, the Tates and we had a back and forth, but then, we came together. We don't need to remind everybody of all the bad blood. I'm like, what's this guy's problem?
Yeah.
What's this guy's problem? Updates channels always stirring the pot, man.
Hey, they're engagement farmers. He's good at his job, but
He is good at his job.
he's very good. So your clippers too. They're like on everything I post. But even though your career is probably in the best situation it's been ever, you seem angry. You seem. I understand. Like Candace said on Aiden's stream, she's like he's 26 and he's really angry, and she has that's an accurate observation of you recently. It's like I look at you. But I mean it's justified. But is there not are you not happy with your accomplishments?
Well, there's a few questions there. I mean, when she said I'm angry, she said, well, she goes, I understand why he's angry because he got canceled by the Jews, but now it's time for him to figure out what he's going to do. It's like, okay, but if you watch the long arc of my show, I'm really not an angry guy. I'm an entertainer and I do a show and I get a little animated, but I'm really not motivated by anger. I've forgiven a lot of people and everything. So I thought that was kind of like a backhanded diss. That was like a passive aggressive diss. And it's also like a typical woman thing. She goes,
yeah, she's a woman.
Well, he's a poor baby. He got victimized and then he was mad, but now he needs to move on. It's like, okay, well, first of all, I didn't get mad. I got canceled and blacklisted from everything. Okay, big difference. It's like she's acting like, they were mean to me and I was upset. No, they went after me for years, lying about me, banning me from social media, banning me from payment processors, banning me from blacklisting me from CPAC, from everything, disavowing me, lying about me, and I fight back. When people lie about me, I correct the record. When people ban me, I, go on an alternative site, whatever. So that's like a kind of shitty, dishonest way to portray it. As far as my attitude right now, I am very short-term pessimistic because of what we're getting from Trump. But I don't know that I would say that I have anger as a guy. I'm very angry about the fact that Trump is not giving us a good option to vote for. And so I am a little bit pissed off about that, but I think that's justified. I think that all things considered, what I and a lot of people went through, and really just the whole story, for Trump to turn his back on everything and now embrace the antithesis of what he ran on initially, it is very frustrating. Yeah. So I would say it's not so much an anger so much as I'm very frustrated. There's like a self-righteous indignation about it. And And as far as my accomplishments, I mean, look, I'm not the guy that kind of leans back in my chair and says, we did it. I'm finally famous again, making a lot of money. That is true. I'm making a lot of money lately and my show's doing well. But I'm really, not to be gay about it or whatever, but I really am about the mission. I could be as rich and famous as possible, but I want the message to be out there. I want the message to win. And if I cared about those things, I would have sold out. If I cared about career success, I could be the biggest thing in the world right now if I would just be supportive of Israel. Case in point, look at someone like Destiny. What an easy go he has because he's a Zionist. Mm-hmm. So I'm really just frustrated about, collabs, YouTube, brand deals, you name it. And you too, by the way. I mean, you'd be the number one thing on Kick or whatever, but of course, Jewish, there's like something going, and I like Aiden Ross, but let's be honest, someone's allowed at Mar-a-Lago. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, and
I like him, but
yeah, so do I. He really does have a good heart. I mean, mm-hmm. He recently said that he doesn't like Zionism, but we should talk to him. Like maybe I could add him to this or something. I don't speak to him much anymore, but he said he's against Zionists. I don't think he knows what it means. I think he saw Speed talk about Zionism and then make that face, and he's like, yeah, I agree. But in that interview, Trump asked him, there was a point where Trump's like, do you like Israel? And I'm like, okay, Trump did the stream because it's like someone told him he's the Jewish streamer. And it is like, yeah, I like Israel. And like, yeah, well, we need to, it's our biggest ally, and just all this yap. And Aiden's nodding his head. And I'm like, oh my God. And then Candace does the stream, and it's like everybody is spamming Nick. And Aiden asks about SNEAKO. But, Candace is like, okay, they're calling me an anti-Semite right now. Let me get on with the Jewish streamer who's popular, the young Gen Z Jewish streamer, and calm down the anti-Semitic allegations. And it's just, it's an uphill battle, but I don't get too bitter about it. And you're right. People ask me like, well, when are you gonna enjoy your career, like quit and have a family? It's like, if I wanted to do that, I would have done it a while ago, and I would have taken, the gambling deal. I would have taken a lot of deals that were presented. But it really is about the truth. It really, that's what this is all about. You have to. Just gotta, and there's the biggest awakening ever. So even though it seems like the U.S. is going to be bad for the next 10 years, if we're going to be realistic, maybe we can touch on that. I'm not sure how much time you have, but it's gonna be bad for a while. I'd say 5-10 years. It's gonna get worse. There's gonna be more abortion, and you're right. People are now saying like the woke mind virus is gone because someone like Elon took over X, but it's only like calming down because of how successful they were at infiltrating the culture, at changing everything and the way we see gender, at the way we view abortion and movies and everything. And all the comedians suck now because of, they're all silenced by everything, our belief system, how the Holocaust has become a religion for so many people. The funniest thing is like Ethan Klein, he challenged me to a debate and ran away. And then I was like looking into his history, and he literally met his IDF wife in a Holocaust museum on a birthright trip to Israel. It does not get more Jewish than that. And yeah, the only reason that seems like the woke mind virus is calming down, and maybe the pendulum's going to swing, right? They give Elon Musk Twitter now to kind of like push back at all the craziness that happened during COVID, and then they ban everybody again. And then maybe like guys like Barry Stanton are another AI psyop that were part of the fake Trump pages from 2016 to get everybody to hate on Indians so they get banned as well. So it seems like it's nice now, but I don't think you could ever get, we can't get too complacent because they will shut you down when they feel that they need to.
Yeah, I think it is going to get worse. I mean, and you're referencing that, I think that tweet I made where I said that wokeism properly understood was a process. It's not a phenomenon. It's a process where, America is changing. It's becoming more liberal, more secular, more brown, more female, more everything. And the problem is the population had these attitudes. They did have these deep-seated attitudes about all those things, about race, gender, tradition, etc. And wokeism was very overt, very big, very aggressive. I feel like they browbeat everybody into submission. And then once everybody was cured of their real racism and real misogyny and real whatever, wokeism was allowed to recede a little bit. And you realize that nobody is really racist anymore. Nobody is really sexist anymore. No one's really any of those things anymore. Even your most hardcore Republican is saying, yeah, the Republican Party should have more diversity and it should have women in it and it should be secular. And, you know, in essence, it worked. We have two parties that are feminist, pro-gay, pro-diversity, pro-everything. And you'd be hard. And people like myself who actually represent old world attitudes about any of that, we're relegated to the fringe. We're called the extreme, the alt-right, the Nazis, the fanatics, the whoever. And I think that in that sense, wokeism can be viewed as a success. Everyone is fundamentally woke. And yeah, they did away with some of the more oppressive, suffocating speech regulations, you know, like now, yeah, you can crack some jokes and it feels like it's a little bit looser now, but that's only because it basically worked. There was a chilling effect. Everyone was destroyed. And now it's receding a little bit now that everyone learned how to play nice. And, you know, and even now it's like you have these like fake non-PC people like Bill Burr. Bill Burr is like the perfect example of someone that went into the re-education camp because he used to be legitimately like sexist or legitimately whatever. Now he's got his black wife and now he went Hollywood and now all these faggot liberals go to his show and they think it's super edgy because he cracks a joke about, you know, well, these white women, they didn't have to deal with slavery. What's the deal with that? It's like, that's actually not edgy. That's actually like a liberal joke. So I feel like that is what has really taken place. And everybody thinks, you know, that we won. I really question that.
It's funny because even though I push back on your white identity thing, the place that I want to move to, I've been all over the world. I do so much. It's the first time I'm back in America in about 2 months. Just came from Saudi and you saw me with the robes and the sandals and stuff and the curvy swords. My favorite place in the whole world so far is Bosnia. Love this place. And I've even all been pushing back against the race mixing and stuff. Places like 99% white. They're Muslim. And they don't dress like in the, you know, in the robes and the curvy swords. They're Muslim, and they're European too. They have European food, a lot of European culture. But I realized, like, why do I like this place? It's like, okay, there's no McDonald's. If we're going to be realistic, I maybe wouldn't have said this a couple months ago. There's not a strong Jewish influence. You don't see it anywhere. It's far away. A lot of the young people I talk to are very red-pilled about certain world events and certain world leaders. They're willing to talk about it. You can make those jokes. And it's also extremely Muslim. So I can pray my 5 daily salah. I could do everything. All the food is halal. The place is that place fits exactly what I want. And I was realizing there, like, wow, maybe my favorite place is like the furthest away from Jews and black people. Am I racist? Like, why would I? I highly recommend that you check a place like this out. I see myself hiding. We're not hiding, but if the U.S. is going to get worse with the wokeism, and I don't even like the word wokeism, just like with the very clear Jewish infiltration of cultures and ethics, because let's see what Christianity got subverted in America. And Jews come in and they do things that Islam forbids, like usury, banking, evil banking. They introduce porn to people. They make everybody think that they're confused. They introduce gender ideology, feminism. They subvert and they get extremely rich. And then everybody doesn't know what happened. So I see myself living in a place like that for a while. But at the end of the day, you're right. Like I am born in New York. I am an American, and I don't want to ditch my native land.
You're an American. Never forget that. It's our birthright. We get to be American. And like, I've really been on that lately because there's so many foreigners in politics and they're trying to wreck our country. And, you know, they, on some level, they have some antipathy towards us. Like, you know, a lot of these other countries, all of them, I'm not even talking about Muslim countries, a lot of, even European countries, they have this antipathy towards America. Even my guys, even my people in Europe who are right wing, I'm not going to name any names, but they have this veiled hatred, seething resentment for America because we're awesome. Because we're awesome and we run everything and we're the biggest and the best. And I don't think that we should compromise that identity, even though it's interesting because we both have gone different paths in a universalist direction, white identity and Catholicism or Islam. But I still think that we should retain that American birthright. It is who we are. I think American identity matters. So as much as, and hey, like being white is kind of a part of that. Like American identity won't be the same when it's all, Indians and Chinese people and Mexicans. Hey.
Yeah, but I'm a Muslim first and an American second. And in my opinion, if I were you, I would say Christ is king first and then America first second, because that's how America got subverted. That's how Americanism took over this capitalist idea, this culture of fat Americans and worshiping Trump, is because people believe that patriotism and the symbols of America, the Statue of Liberty, they treat that like a religion instead of prioritizing Christianity.
Yeah, but I mean, we also do have a political problem. And look, I am a Catholic first, but I do run a political movement. I'm not a priest. That's the thing. I mean, because I don't even think I'd be the best representative, because I'm not the most disciplined Catholic and I'm not the most knowledgeable, but I'm a political reformer. And the political problem is the lack of sovereignty. And that is a big part of why we're being subjected to so much propaganda. So I'm a Catholic first as a guy, but I run a political movement. And that is really an American sovereignty movement, because this country's being raped to death by spies and foreigners and foreign intel agencies, billionaires, transnational companies. And until we can get some order, it's going to be very difficult for any kind of social movement to take root. That's my firm belief.
Yeah, and now people in the chat are saying that I need to be deported and I'm not a real American. Yeah. But this is where, like,
you can stay.
There's a good example of, I was born here. There's a good example of like that white identity patriotism thing getting subverted with Stephen Yaxley Lennon, and his fake name is Tommy Robinson.
Mm-hmm.
This guy, apparently he's Irish or something, but he comes in, it says like Britain first, all this. And when you put patriotism ahead of religion, look how easily it got subverted by the Jews. Mossad clearly funds this guy. Mossad clearly wants him to stir up divisions and demonize Muslims, even though Muslim immigration in the UK is not even the majority. It's Indians. Hindu Indians make up the majority, but he's blaming Islamists and jihadists when they didn't even do the knife crime that they're blaming the riots for. It's like Muslims, for the most part, are participating in society in a healthy way. They're not causing destruction. They're not getting in the way of whatever white identity that they're scared of losing. A lot of them the overwhelming majority of Muslims in the UK they're just living the way that they're supposed to live under the rules of Islam.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Tommy Robinson has an ulterior motive. I think that obviously he's a shill and he's a spy for Israel, and his job is to vilify Muslims because that is what justifies wars in the Middle East. And that is what fortifies the position of the Jews in these societies in Europe and America. At the same time, there is a demographic problem. I mean, white English people are the minority in London. And, Muslims aren't the only ones. It's Indians and it's other types. It's Africans. It's other types of people, but it's Caribbean people. But that is a problem. Don't you? I mean, you don't probably see it that way, because you would like to see the whole United Kingdom be under Sharia law.
Alhamdulillah.
Yeah, but there's more diversity in London than there is in Africa or in the Middle East, and that's a problem. I mean, so these people are being genocided. And look, I'm not English at all. I'm not a lick of English. I'm Irish, which is about as close as it comes to it. So I don't say this as like, people say, well, you're Fuentes. Okay, I don't have a dog in the fight, but I still think there's something wrong with English people being wiped out. That's their homeland. That's their ancient homeland of their people, and they're being replaced in their own land. And I think that's a sad thing.
Yeah, but guys like him, they come in, they talk about a real problem, right? That there's a white genocide going on, but they blame Muslims for no reason. Like there should be more encouragement for white people to have a lot of kids. They're not, because their culture got gay really quick. I mean, let's be real. It got subverted by LGBT, by feminism. A lot of women are in their 30s. They don't want to have kids. They want to be independent girl bosses. Gay people came in. Transgenderism came in. And that's a part of the reason the population isn't growing. That's what they don't talk. Well, that's what a lot of whites in the UK, not you specifically, don't talk about, is that the reason that the whites are getting genocide is not just because of immigration. It's because whites are not having kids as much, and there's a real issue there. Also, they say like, oh, we need to deport them all. We need to deport. How is that going to happen, right? These people have passports. A lot of the people with sandals and robes that you talk about that I hang out with in London, they're born in the UK. So how would they be deported? It's just like, it's something that white people type online, but there's no actual solution there. There's no real, the real solution would be, hey, have 4 wives and have a lot of halal sex, get them all pregnant and have 10 kids. There's a lot of guys. I met some guys in Bosnia specifically, and it's crazy to me that I don't see people in Europe talk about this. There's like some white Bosnians I know have multiple wives. These guys have like 10, 12 kids. And you see a lot of the people online talk about how they want to have this many kids. They want to like have like a bunch of strong sons and all this. The only people that I've met, the only white people that I met are doing that are Muslim.
Yeah, but I mean, here's the thing. On some level, if there were no diversity there, it wouldn't be a pronounced problem because the population can shrink and it can recover. But if it's replaced and then subjugated politically, it's over. So if the Muslims come in while the whites are diminishing and then they take over politically like they are, because, you know, the prime minister was brown, you know, the guy in Ireland was brown, guy in Scotland was brown, they're all brown. Then they get subjugated and then they become a permanent minority and an underclass. And that's really the issue. I mean, how would you feel? I mean, you're from America, but how would Muslims feel if Saudi Arabia opened it up and you had a bunch of Westerners, you had a bunch of white people hanging out in Riyadh and in Mecca and Medina, you know, smoking weed and playing bongos and listening to the Eagles and all of that? People would say, this is blasphemous. Get out of here. You know, this is the land of the prophet. It's the same thing. It's kind of like, yeah, we don't want to hear the call to prayer in London because London's like a Christian European city-state, has been for 1,000 years, you know, and so that's kind of the same feeling. And by the way, here's the thing, like, and I get it, you know, guys like Suleiman and other Muslims, they're like, well, you know, white people need to have more kids. Okay. What they're not going to like is the fact that if white people got the life force to have more kids, because the problem is they have no life force. The men are weak. There's no like desire for life. If they had it, they would be intensely xenophobic and racist. If white people had the life force to go and get down, like you're saying, and have tons of kids and be men, you know, that means high tea. That means, you know, sex crazy. And for white people to do that, they're gonna not like foreigners. So like it is going to involve like ultimately a race war, however it happens, you know. And Muslims like to say, well, you guys just need to have more kids. Okay, well, if the white men get really pissed and want to have kids and they love being white, they want to have white kids, you think they're also going to say, hey, but I love diversity too. Look at all my brown friends. This is fine. No, they're going to want to kick them out. So it's kind of like, be careful what you wish for. I mean, on some level, it is a conflict. It's a race conflict. It's a religious conflict. There's no getting around that. And it's brought on by globalization and, you know, some of these trends.
It's more of a religious problem than a race problem, because like that white guy playing the bongos is not going to go to Saudi Arabia because he has no reason to when he could do that in a Western place that's liberalized and that's going to accept it. Right. I actually know a lot of Americans that have moved and have uprooted. There's this one guy, Mutabil. He used to be in Tupac's group, and now he has a restaurant in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. And he brought he makes ribs like Southern black people. He brought like one of those, like a Southern meat. I don't know what the word is, but he has a restaurant like that in Saudi Arabia, and he's Muslim and he's contributing to society and he's allowed. They let him immigrate into the country fine. The reason that he goes there is because of religious reasons, and that's why it's accepted. A white guy is not going to go to Saudi Arabia because if he wants to smoke weed and do that, he's just going to stay home.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the point is. I mean, I think that a lot of Muslims resent the fact that the Muslim world is being westernized. The only difference is that it's not a demographic issue because, you know, our countries are richer, white countries are richer and kind of generally, you know, have better quality of life. And our population is dying. But if the Muslim world was such an attractive place to live, and if we had more people, we would probably be moving there, and Muslims wouldn't like it. In the same way, they don't like this cultural hegemony that the West exerts, even though our population's going away. And all that is to say is like, look, the problem isn't just that whites aren't having kids; it's that there is a significant foreign element, and as long as there is difference, there's going to be conflict. It's really that simple. Diversity is not a strength. I mean, these people come here and like, look, they have different culture, different customs, different beliefs, and the more that they have to deal with each other on a daily basis and fight for the same resources, they're gonna fight. That's the history of civilization. So, I don't think that it's a remedy to just say, hey, have more kids. It's like, well, if you have more kids, there's still gonna be an issue.
I mean, that's what I love. That's what I resonated with Islam always, and why like the teaching. Well, the book of Malcolm X always made sense is because when a king kneels next to a peasant and they're both worshiping God, they're equal. It gets rid of that diversity problem because we don't. Nationalism is not a part of Islam at all. There's no association. As long as you're Muslim, you're my brother, and that's why it's the most. I would say probably the most universal religion, and why it makes the most sense there because we're all Muslims and we're equal under faith, not region.
The thing is, though, don't you think that you can kind of get away with that in like in the abstract, but that's not what the Muslim world is. The Muslim world is very diverse, and there are conflicts, and they do have ideology. I mean, are we really going to sit here and pretend that the Muslim world is singing "Kumbaya" over Islam? Everyone's kneeling together and praying.
Yeah,
I mean,
well, not "Kumbaya," but singing the prayer.
There's intense religious conflict between Iran and Saudi Arabia, between, some of the radicals and the more moderates. And, I mean, look at what's going on right now in the Middle East. And I understand that Israel's doing the bombing, but Muslim countries are helping them, and Muslim countries are against other Muslim countries. So, you kind of have, when it comes to Christians, I feel like Muslims love to point out Christians are too liberal. Christians have lost their way. Christians have diversity. Nationalism conflicts with it. And as if there's this like idealistic version of Islam where everything's perfect and everyone's pious and there's no corruption, no degeneracy, no liberalization, no westernization, no sectarian or religious conflict. I mean, that's obviously not the truth. And they like to blame it all on the West, but it's been going on a long time. So that's just, I feel like that's a lot of it is human nature and problems that the whole world is undergoing because of globalization and modernity together.
Which are subwords for Jewish power. I think it really
but then and technology and liberalism. I mean, yeah, Jews are a big driver of it, but a lot of it's sociological.
Mm-hmm. All right, we're kind of yapping in circles. Are you doing a show tonight?
Yeah, you're making me late. Not much later than normal.
Yeah,
but I'm gonna do a show.
Yeah, I tried to give you a couple exits so I wouldn't keep you too long, but I'm autistic. You got to kick me out. Thanks again for coming on, Nick. It's always good to. It's been a while, man. You can hit me up more. We can, whatever. It's good to. It's always good to talk to you.
Yeah, man. Likewise, good to catch up. Good talk. I'll see you later.
Talk soon. Assalamu alaikum.
As-salam. Yeah. Christ is king.
All right, bro.
God bless you. All right, later.
I think Nick Fuentes said a lot of good things, but I think he's a white supremacist. That's why I don't like him. But some good point he pointed out in front of us, and that's it, bro. What do we need? We need to learn, and we have to be very good person, and we need to know about other peoples. And as a Muslim, I don't want to force anyone to do anything. Okay, you have your free will. You can do anything, bro. Just go ahead, but make yourself disciplined. Discipline make you very, very strong. So yeah, and yeah, come to Islam, bro. Habibi, come to Islam.